Well, sir, I think it's an issue that both women and men should pay attention to, because today is Equal Pay Day in South Africa, a day that's commemorated annually to bring awareness to the pay differences between men and women doing the same jobs. The day is marked on the day in the year when a woman would have finally caught up with her male counterpart's salary earned in the previous year. Now, this will vary from year to year, from country to country, highlighting the differences in the wage gaps. And to tell us a little bit more about the significance of this day and what it tells us about the plight of women in the workplace, I'm now joined by Dr. Meyer, who's a career and educational specialist at Boston City Campus and Business School. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, so it's the 12th of April, and that's Equal Pay Day in South Africa. How do we calculate that? How do we get to this day?
So what we would do is we'd look at the income differentials between males and females in exactly the same positions with the same skill sets and qualifications. And then we would calculate what men in South Africa earn on average 6,600 Rand more than the average female.
Wow.
So if we do that equation, we come to the 12th of April as the day where females would have caught up. So basically the employer could have given you a voucher to say you're working free for the first 4 months of the year.
Wow.
And this is the day that you'll start earning comparatively with your male counterparts in the workplace.
So I suppose another way of looking at it is that it will take a woman 15 and a half months to earn what a man earns in 12 months.
Indeed, but we must also remember in sub-Saharan Africa, at the current normalization rates, it's going to take us 135 years to normalize that, where females and males would be on an equal pay differential. But globally, we're not doing too badly.
Okay, so tell us about the situation. How does South Africa compare?
So in terms of the World Economic Forum, they release a report every year, and South Africa is ranked 19th in the world. We have two African countries in the top 10, which is Rwanda and Namibia. Rwanda being 6th and Namibia being 10th. And there are 4 criterion against which we are measured. So we're doing very well in some of the areas. We're not doing too well in terms of graduates, in terms of higher education. And secondly, because the normalization number is very, very low. And the second area is in terms of economic participation in the economy. So we know that in the South African economy, females make up 42.8% of the workforce, but for example, only make up 32% of the management cadre of the South African workforce.
And we were talking a little bit just before we came on air that 8% of the workforce are our helpers at home.
Indeed. So domestic workers make up 8% of the economic activity in terms of employees in the workplace. And we also know that these individuals, and when we say it, we don't mean it lightly, that on the backs of these domestic workers, the economies have grown because we see what they use their money for. And they use their money for studies for their children and for the well-being of their children. So it's a very large part of our economy that is often overlooked and grossly underpaid.
I know that there's a long history, and it's not just here in South Africa, but why does the pay gap persist? What are some of the issues contributing to that?
So there's a historic element, obviously, to it, where a lot of the positions that are currently available were not accessible to women. And even when you walk into organizations now, there's still discriminatory practices, whether it is covertly. The receptionists, the secretaries, the ladies bringing the tea. So it's a continual perceptual element that we're implementing in the workforce. And also that females only really started actively participating in the economies from the 1990s in South Africa.
So how do we close that gap? I know that you've got 4 areas that you talk about. What can we do?
Well, I think that we have some of the best legislation in the world, and the Department of Labour has now issued a Code of Good Practice. Well, they did so in 2014 in terms of equal pay for equal value. And I think employers need to train their staff properly, that their skills development initiatives, that we look at companies like Discovery and Netcare that have childcare facilities at the places of work, so women don't have to feel guilty when they leave the office. They know their children are safe.
So that's support with childcare. What's flexibility? What do you mean there?
Flexibility is around that we don't always need people in the workplace. They can work remotely from home. They can work flexi hours so that they can drop their children at school. There's aftercare, so that we are flexible in terms of our approach. Start measuring people on output, not on input and whether they're sitting at the office. I'm a little bit old, so I always speak about the solitaire generation. So people can sit at the office the entire day playing solitaire. It doesn't make them productive.
And we are in 4IR, so that's becoming the new workplace anyway, isn't it, just by default?
Without a doubt.
What is this gender-neutral leave?
So we're provocating that both males and females get leave to look after newborn children and adopted children. At the moment, females get 4 months unpaid leave, and some employers do pay. But males should get exactly the same and contribute equally. So rather have a normalization of saying both will get 3 months or 2 months paid leave to help with the rearing of their children, so that they can be a real transformative element in terms of taking care of children. It can't always feel a drop. Everything has to drop on the woman's shoulders that they have to do. They have to have full-time employment, they have to look after the children, they have to look after the family problems. So we're saying normalize all of these areas and have joint responsibility.
And it's usually that time away from work that ends up prejudicing women, isn't it, in the workplace?
Indeed, because males will obviously often feel that why must they pick up the slack, the woman has to leave. But one thing I've learned of being a manager for thousands of people over the years is you get good men and you get good women, you get productive men and you get productive women, and conversely, you get people that aren't. So don't judge somebody on their gender, judge them on their output.
Okay, so the role of educational institutions, what do you make of that?
Just saying that people should have lifelong learning opportunities, because that's the only way that you're going to better yourself and advance your career and be able to get higher positions, so that there is more flexibility.
All right. Is there a role for government, private sector, when they're doing hiring and things like that? How is it that they can justify giving 2 people who left university at the same day different pays because of their genders?
Well, they certainly can't, and that's why we have this very strong legislation, but it's about the enforcement. Everything is always about the enforcement, but I think that in private organizations there needs to be a broader social context where we don't accept these practices, because you can look for an excuse and say somebody has better skill, they have better potential, because there are 5 criteria on which you can have that differential. Qualifications being one, skills level, but we have to start looking at people's potential and start treating people fairly and equitably.
All right, so today, 12th of April, is Equal Pay Day in South Africa. If it improves, that means next year it might be in March or February if we're really lucky. Have we been improving over time though?
We've remained, there's a slight improvement, but we've remained stagnant. So we're happy if we win 1 day or 2 days in a year. It is a struggle, but we can't be despondent, and we need to do the advocacy work to ensure that there is progress in this area.
And on average in the continent it'll take 135 years to get to pay day being the 31st of December equal to men.
Yes, and globally we're looking at 154 years to normalise that. So we need to have initiatives to address that more actively.
Linda, thanks very much indeed. I think this is a conversation we constantly need to have, and today is a good day to be marking it, to continue to highlight the issue. Thank you so much indeed for coming through.